Today, we're going to put on our financial analyst hats and really dig into a fascinating question. What happens when a global superpower tries to strong arm its closest ally? We're going to break down the cascading risks and the shocking boomerang effect of a recent US-Canada trade crisis. It's an incredible real-world case study with lessons for pretty much everyone.
And this quote right here, it just perfectly sets the scene. For more than a century, you had this US-Canada economic relationship that was basically a bedrock of global trade. I mean, solid as a rock. But as our source material notes, it took just a matter of months for all of that to get shattered. And it's the speed of that collapse that made this whole thing so incredibly dangerous.
Okay, so first things first. To really get a handle on the risk here, you have to understand the system itself. Our source describes these two economies not as, separate countries that just happen to be next to each other, but as one gigantic, interwoven economic organism. They weren't just neighbors, they were basically fused together. And this is just a brilliant illustration of how deep that connection goes. Just think about one single part inside a North American-made car. It's not made in one place. It gets stamped here, shipped there, sent back. It crosses the border an average of 7 times before that car is even finished. It's literally like the circulatory system of a single body, with goods just flowing back and forth like the border isn't even there. And if you want to understand the sheer scale of this, look at this number, $400 million. That's the value of trade crossing just one bridge, the Ambassador Bridge between Detroit and Windsor, every single day. A full quarter of all the merchandise trade between these two massive economies flows over one single stretch of road. It's wild.
All right, so you've got this incredibly complex, finely tuned system. Now, let's talk about the shock that was introduced. The Trump administration strategy. The source material calls it a strategy of absolute, overwhelming economic force, and Canada was put right in the crosshairs.
And the weapon of choice? A staggering 25% tariff on key imports. But here's the crucial question that any analyst worth their salt is going to ask. Who actually bears the cost of this weapon? Who really pays the price?
Well, our source gives us a really clear definition here. A tariff isn't some fee that the Canadian government pays. No, it's a tax paid by the American company that's importing the product. And of course, where does that cost go? It gets passed immediately down the line, straight to the American consumer. As the source puts it, it's basically a sales tax on your life levied directly by the White House.
And on top of this economic pressure, you had this unbelievably inflammatory rhetoric. The source talks about these surreal meetings where Canadian officials were apparently told that if they couldn't meet the demands, maybe they should just become the 51st state, and that their prime minister would make a great governor. This wasn't just business. It was meant to be a humiliation. So that's the opening salvo. But now we get to the countermove. And this is where the story gets really interesting, because the entire American strategy was based on this fundamental and, as we're about to see, fatal misunderstanding of who they were actually up against. You see, the White House thought they were bullying the same polite, consensus-driven government they were used to. They fully expected Canada to just fold under the pressure. But what they didn't realize was that they were actually facing Mark Carney. And this guy is not your typical politician. He's a world-class central banker, a man who ran the Bank of England. He's a technocrat who understands financial warfare, leverage, and macroeconomic pain points better than almost anyone on the planet.
So when that pressure came, Carney didn't panic. Not at all. He went to the World Economic Forum in Davos and delivered this absolutely stunning public rebuke. This wasn't a plea for mercy. This was a signal. A clear message to Washington and to the entire global market. The age of automatic deference to America was over. The U.S. was no longer a reliable partner.
And back in Washington, they pretty much dismissed this as just political posturing. A huge mistake. They failed to anticipate that the real retaliation wasn't going to be some angry letter. It was going to be a carefully calibrated economic counterstrike. A boomerang that was about to swing right back and hit the U.S. economy where it really, really hurts. The real weapon here wasn't some official government policy, it was a grassroots, digitally coordinated, buy-Canadian movement that leaders like Carney could really lean into. The message was so simple and so powerful. If they don't want us as an ally, they don't get our money. And almost overnight, Canadian consumer spending, the absolute lifeblood of so many U.S. border towns, it just stopped. And the impact was immediate, and it was absolutely devastating. I mean, just look at these numbers. retail sales in U.S. border counties plummeted by an average of 40%. 40%! Malls in upstate New York that depended on Canadian shoppers basically became ghost towns. And the first people to feel that pain were the small business owners, many of whom actually supported the America First agenda.
So, and this is the crucial point, right? This economic pain didn't just stop at the shopping mall. The boomerang effect kept on traveling. It moved from the checkout counter right to the heart of American manufacturing, onto the factory floor itself. Hey, remember those car parts crossing the border 7 times? Well, every single time one of those parts came back into the US, bam, it got hit with that new 25% tax. The cost to build a single Ford F-150 skyrocketed by thousands of dollars, and that cost was passed directly on to American families who just wanted to buy an American truck. So, let's tally the final bill for this strategy, shall we? Let's look at the one number, the single data point a risk analyst dreams of finding that reveals the fatal flaw in the entire overwhelming force calculation. So what was it? What did the financial models miss? What was the one piece of data that the White House overlooked that completely changed the picture of this entire economic conflict? The answer is this number right here, 82%. So what is this 82%? Well, this is the real kicker. This is the portion of the U.S. trade deficit with Canada that's made up of essential energy and raw materials. We're talking fuel, steel, things the United States has to import because it can't produce enough at home. So the tariff strategy wasn't just taxing Canadian goods, it was taxing the very fuel needed to run the American economy. They were taxing the inputs required to build the very American greatness they were promising. So, the ultimate result? It wasn't a 51st state that buckled under pressure. No, it was the exact opposite. It created a more independent, more defiant Canada that, under Carney's leadership, totally outmaneuvered a superpower by aggressively finding new trade partners, moving away from the now unreliable U.S. market. And this whole case study just leaves us with a final, really provocative thought. It proved that in our modern, interconnected economy, leverage isn't just about who's bigger or stronger. It's about who is more dependent. It really makes you ask, how much power does a bully really have when their target proves